It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, we have a guest again today.
We do.
Supposed to
We
be
do.
joining us yesterday, but yeah, this is who we were talking about. This was by the way, everybody that was here, the episode that Jenna was here just a couple days ago, and Alan gave us the tease about a body part, like very thrown off by that. We can kind of explain that now, I guess. Wes Yer joining the show. Wes,
The host of the, among other things, the host of the Ears and Beers podcast, talking about West Virginia sports. Wes Yer, also perhaps more prominently host on the Steelers radio network, and more attached to this show anyway, but maybe not, as the 54 jersey he's wearing could be predictive of West Virginia Senator Zack Frasier. Certainly a guy we're going to be talking about a lot on this episode and the rest of the offseason for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Wes, what's going on, pal?
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I apologize. I look much better than I did yesterday. I did bail on you guys. Yes, I've got the suds or whatever's going around. I've got 2 daughters in daycare, right? So they pick it up, they bring it home type thing. I look much better. I don't know if someone's watching on an HD, like a 4K camera, my nose is probably still red. I ran through like 3 boxes of tissues yesterday. So I appreciate you guys letting me call an audible, and I'm excited to be on the afternoon drive here.
You sound good. I mean, maybe it's the mic. I'm not sure, but you sound fine.
That's all that matters, baby. It is the Shore family. How's the hair? Hair look okay too? I mean, voice is one thing. Hair okay? I'm trying to take over Richie Walsh's throne like 10 years from now.
Just a couple of frosted tips away from J.J. Watt at the Super Bowl.
Oh my goodness. JJ looked like he was trying to be the next lead singer of The Offspring or something. What was he doing?
I don't know, man. I have no clue what was going on there. And people that are listening to this show probably wonder what's going on right now on here.
If you were my age, you either wanted frosted tips and are now glad that you didn't get them, or you had them and now regret having them. Those are really the only 2 options.
Yes.
There are no pictures you can find of me on the internet from 2001 with frosted tips. I'm very thankful that does not exist.
Oh man,
Zach, if you'll indulge me for just a quick second here. I mean, like, I'm kind of between you and Alan, right? Alan's a little bit older than me. You're a little bit younger. So I can kind of bridge this gap. Like I was born in 91, right? So like I was 9-10 years old, kind of at the height of the NSYNC Backstreet Boys 98 Degrees mania, right? I had blonde hair until I was about 12 years old. And then it just switched for whatever reason. But my hair was like bright blonde until I was 11, 12, 13 years old, in that range there. And I so vividly remember in 2000 or 2001, I would have been 9 or 10, NSYNC came to Pittsburgh. It might have been the Heinz Field opening concert, something like that. And all my friends, like everyone was going and everyone was dying, like, was frosting their tips blonde. And I remember like crying to my mom because she wouldn't let me frost the tips of my hair, and her being like, Wesley, your hair's already blonde. You can't frost your hair. It's frosted already. If you went and got frosted tips, it would make no difference. Like, you have no idea what you have, the hair that everyone's trying to have. And I had a complete and total meltdown for like a whole weekend because my mom wouldn't let me frost my already blonde hair.
My frosted tips were grills. Me and my boys got grills. Went to the mall and all got
real ones,
together.
or did you just put pieces of like juicy fruit gum wrappers?
We got real ones. We got real ones from the mall. There was like Not 4 bad. Of us that got them. Yeah.
Were you wearing a wife beat when you went and bought them?
wearing them to the middle school dances? No, I think I was wearing a tap out shirt. Probably. Works. Yeah.
Works. Some Ed Hardy jeans. You know.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, let's talk about football a little bit, I guess, on this show, at least before we get into the last part of the show talking about Wes. I feel like this part has already kind of been that, but we do want to talk about some Steelers stuff. Alan, this rookie draft class that just came in, I think that's where we want to start today. Who was it that ranked them one of the 5 best now?
Mr. Basso from CBS Sports ranked the Steelers 2023 draft class as the 5th best in the NFL, despite not having one of the 30 best players, which I think is really an interesting dynamic where they're getting a lot of credit for their depth in picks 1, 2, 3, and 4. and actually 1, 2, 3, and 5 were the four guys that he highlighted: Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, and Nick Herbig. And I think I think it's an interesting place to start a conversation about the Steelers 2024 offseason, because I do think that was a really good draft class. And we talked yesterday about maybe what some of the differences were between Kevin Colbert and Omar Khan. And I think, that was sort of framed on our conversation yesterday about analytics based on Kevin Colbert's comments. But I just think in general, I feel like this was a fresh perspective from the Steelers about the way they attacked the draft. It looked noticeably different in the way they were willing to move around the draft board, right? The trade up to get Broderick Jones, the trade back, still get Darnell Washington, pick up the pick to get Nick Herbig. I thought that was noteworthy. And so what do we think made the Steelers draft class good? And the Steelers are a very predictable organization. They do things their way year in and year out. Obviously, the change from Kevin Colbert to Omar Khan kind of threw off a lot of our preconceived notions about what the Steelers were going to do. Do we have any of those going forward? Like, do we think we can make some broad scale predictions about 2024 based on the way that 2023 went?
Wes, you're the guest, so I'll let you go first.
That's very nice of you there, Smitty. Guys, that is kind of the question, and that's, I think, the question of a lot of these, certainly the draft as it pertains to what you guys just asked me, but maybe free agency and attacking the potential trade market as well, too. Like, there is such a small sample size of Omar Khan. It's not the multiple decades that we had of Kevin Colbert. And, the Steelers are moving. Like, they might be moving like the Titanic, like slowly. They might be moving like a Carnival cruise ship, like off, the Baltimore port there. But they have slowly been doing business more progressively, I think, over the last 5, 6, 7 years. More active in trading up in drafts, more active in free agency, more willing to make trades, willing to fire a coordinator in season, all those different things that for so long were thought of not being the Steeler way. So I expect that to continue. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that continues to mean moving up in the first round when you want to go get your guy. If that means going and aggressively getting a guy like Justin Fields or a Kirk Cousins that we can talk about if you guys want to go down that route. But that's intriguing in all of these facets, particularly as it relates to the draft, obviously. And I think you have to at least be semi-encouraged because, albeit small sample size so far, it's been different, it's been progressive, and I think they've had more hits than they've had misses.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway from the 2023 draft when it happened was they played the board in a way that I didn't see them do in the past. Like I would feel like that was like a very Baltimore Ravens like draft.
Yes,
the way that
100%.
It just seems to always come up, everything Ravens, whether it's trading up or down, you just feel like, wow, they got that value at that pick. That's how I came away looking at this Steelers draft class. And obviously we're just talking about one season, but the return on investment looks very good on that up to this point. This is really going to be, I think, like a big test. And that's why I think the question is, like, do we even want the Steelers to be trading draft capital with the way that we saw them utilize that draft capital in their first time? Like, it was a very cohesive feel to the draft too. Like, maybe it was a matter of getting Omar, a guy like Andy Weidl, attached to him, and maybe not having still not creating that too many cooks in the kitchen type feel where it was like, clashing of minds or anything like that. It was just a cohesive effort where, he kind of let him control the board, Omar do his thing, and it turned out the way that it did. Is it going to continue to do so? I don't know, but I don't necessarily have a reason to believe that it won't either.
Yeah, I think that really highlights the differences between Kevin and Omar. Kevin came up as a scout. I think Kevin was very, very laser focused on getting the best player for the Pittsburgh Steelers with the draft picks that he had. Whereas Omar is more of a numbers guy. In dealing with contract negotiations, which was his specialty, a lot of the things that what you need to know is not just how much you think this player is worth, but how much the rest of the league is going to think they're worth. Like, that is a very important part of negotiating free agent contracts, which was Omar's primary responsibility before he became GM. I think so that moving around the draft board part, that like getting good perceived value for his picks, like that should be more of Omar's specialty. And I agree. I think the addition of Andy Weidl has let the scouting part of things still flourish while you have a horse trader type GM who's going to get the picks in the right places to make those. I think it could be a really, really productive marriage. Art Rooney, when he spoke to me and the rest of the print media earlier this offseason, said he was asked, do you think this team is farther ahead now than it was entering the 2023 offseason? And what are your sources for optimism? And he said, yes, I do think it's farther ahead than it was entering the 2023 off. And the very first thing he said was the 2023 draft class. That is why I am so optimistic about the future of this team, because we just did this and we did such a good job. And boy, if we do it again, one or two more times, look at what that's going to yield. And so I, in my head, have a hard time driving that comment from the owner, from the president, with the idea of like, oh, well, they're just going to give Kirk Cousins $90 million in free agency or trade 2 top 3 draft picks for Justin Fields. Like, that doesn't feel like reimagining the 2023 draft class. That feels like something completely different. So, I mean, if they're going to reimagine the 2023 draft class, to me, I think that option is very much out there. But when we look at the board, I mean, it's a deep tackle class. It's deep at center. Obviously, Zack Frasier, it was a guy that has been highly linked to them in the second round. I think they'll be able to get a first-round tackle. It really feels like if you just gave Andy Weidl the keys to the franchise, not saying that it's anything is anyone's responsibility alone, but he'd be picking 2 guys over 325 pounds in this draft class at first and second round, 100%. And I can't say that's a bad idea. They probably need a defensive tackle too. So maybe 1, 2, 3 even. And if that's what they're really, if we're taking Art at his word for it, like, doesn't that feel like that's a much more likely outcome this year than making a big swing on a quarterback?
Yes, because one thing that I truly believe is, like, Art doesn't blow smoke in those regards of what he wants and how he feels about his team. Now, we might argue when he talks urgency and things like that, we might argue about how the strings that he's pulling to address it. But when he addresses something vocally in his kind of end of season, particularly meetings that he does with real journos like Alan and the rest of his colleagues, that stuff is backed up. I mean, Alan, you remember for 2 straight years, he talked about the run game and the lack thereof. And what did the Steelers do those 2 off seasons? They went and got Najee Harris. They went and overturned the offensive line in free agency, right? I mean, he talked about run game.
2021 offseason, we talked to Art, and then I get to Mobile, right? So Art says, we were dead to last in the running game. We got to get better in the running game. I get to Mobile, and I watch Mike Tomlin literally do nothing but watch running back.
But watch Najee Harris. Yes.
All right, I know what they're doing. Like, it took 10 minutes that offseason to figure out the plan. He's not, like you said, he's not blowing smoke. He's not hiding his intentions.
Like, this was my 6th season, working on the radio network side of the things for the Steelers. And that's like one thing that I firmly believe in 6 years. I know you've been around the team longer than I have, but when Art says something, you might disagree with how they go about pragmatically attacking it or getting after it, but they're going to attack it and get after it. So yeah, when he talks about run game for 2 off seasons, and then they go out and completely turn over the offensive line and go and draft the first-round running back, makes a lot of sense. When he's talking now about draft class, I actually hadn't thought about this. I'm going to steal this for the show. Moats and I do. Thank you, gentlemen. Like, they probably don't want to give up any draft picks because, 1, they saw what these guys just did last year and they want them to go do that again. And 2, they want to see if they can go do that again and see what they're working with.
Yeah, I mean, historically, this is a team that likes to operate through the draft anyways. Like, that might be another complaint of the fan base, but you know that they're going to do it. Like, it's draft over free agency, and that's great and all, but you certainly got to hit. I just brought up, and this has nothing to do with necessarily the Steelers, but I'll find a way to tie it back to. I was curious because there's obviously a Kansas City draft class from 2 years ago that they've only known winning the Super Bowl. So their 2022 Kansas City draft class: Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal, Joshua Williams, Darian Kennard, Jalen Watson, Isaiah Pacheco. I don't know who this other one is. Najee Johnson. How many of those guys that I listed were like huge contributors for them too? I mean, think about that. Like, we could be talking something similar to like that 2017 Saints draft class with something like that. There is definitely obviously more value to being able to build through the draft class because those guys are also going to be cheaper as opposed to paying highly priced free agents. Like, and I think that the Steelers, with the way that they attacked the 2023 draft class, should have every reason that these 2 guys in charge of it right now can do so.
Leo Chenal with the last pick in the 3rd round and Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th is
Leo
just
Chenal was my guy too. I was losing my mind watching him drop down the board, and then it was, of course, Kansas City took him. Like, oh my goodness, I lost my mind watching him fall. But yeah, I guess my point there was you've seen teams be able to have those types of draft classes, and I think with what we've seen from the Steelers, once again, we'll say it just to bring it back, it's only been one season, one draft of Omar Khan and Andy Weidl, but like, why wouldn't you have the faith that they can put together these types of draft classes every single year?
And one more thing too, guys, is say you go out here and you nail the draft class again, right? Maybe end up moving and shaking within the draft of moving up a couple picks, moving down a couple picks at certain spots, whatever. But relatively, the draft is the draft, and you nail it like you did this past year. This upcoming season plays out, and you have another great rookie draft class. And once again, we're all sitting here 11 months, 12 months from now talking quarterback. This team is a quarterback away, right? I think you'd feel a lot better this time next year than going, okay, Kenny Pickett is clearly not the guy. The guy's clearly not on our roster. Let's go aggressively get someone, whether it's someone who's already in the league, whether we think it's this draft guy, because we have this great rookie class. We have this great sophomore class. We've got a great nest, a great nucleus built. It's still not going to cost us money for a couple years. Okay, if we have to go out and pay some for the quarterback, so be it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think we said that. What show was that? A couple weeks, maybe last week or maybe early this week. I don't even know where the quarterback away discussion. I just don't feel like they're there yet. There's too many other.
No, I don't either. But maybe they are. Maybe they are 11 months from now. You know?
I agree. Like they need a tackle. They need a center. They need a defensive tackle. They need a cornerback. They need a linebacker. They need a safety. Like that. There's a lot out there.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, like they probably need a slot wide receiver. Like there's a lot out there that is not just quarterback. But like you said, if you nail another offseason, that's certainly within reach. That then you could make that big swing a year from now, and you never know what's going to happen. With the guys you got to, you can accidentally find something that you don't know you had or you didn't know you were looking for. I do think they'll probably try to find a young quarterback in the draft somewhere, third day pick, something like that. And you never know what those guys can turn into. But I think that's if I'm making a prediction about the way the Steelers are going to operate this offseason, that's absolutely the way I'm leaning, that they're not going to make a big splash move, spend a lot of money, or trade a lot of draft capital to get a quarterback this year with so many other needs. And the idea that they can really replicate this draft formula that they put down in 2023 and continue to build the core of this team. And if you do that enough years in a row, if you get to a place where you just feel like you're in a quarterback emergency and you got to push all the chips in there one year, well, then you can go ahead and do it. Wes, I want to talk to you about Zack Frasier because I think of all of the guys that I've seen connected to the Steelers, he might be the most pervasive of those in terms of everybody I talk to just says, well, that guy's a Steeler. You've obviously gotten to watch him a lot as someone who covers West Virginia and was a West Virginia alum. What do you make of him and the fit between Zack Frasier and the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, it's been very weird how this has all come together for me over the past year. Alan, we see each other at the Combine every single year, right? I usually come up and grab you at some point and ask you to come do 15 minutes with us to kill a segment on SNR, and you're kind enough to do it. Last year at the draft, if you guys will recall, there was like 6 or 7 Pitt guys there at the draft last year. There was a lot of Pitt guys, or at the Combine, last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And only one for WVU, I believe. Dante Stills was the only person there. So I was getting some grief from Dale Lawley and Matt Williamson on SNR, who are both Pitt guys, of, hey, what's going on? Look at all these Pitt guys here. You only got one WVU guy here. Hey, what's going on? Just friendly banter. And I said to those guys almost a year ago, I said, 12 months from now, we'll be talking about this center from West Virginia, Zack Frasier. All right? I'm telling you, you enjoy yourself now, okay? Because 12 months from now, we're going to be talking about this center from West Virginia, Zack Frasier. Half kidding, half serious. And then to watch it all play out from that clearly becoming a position of need, maybe the position of need for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think particularly if you're going to take the quarterback debate out of the equation, right? And the season that Zack had his senior year down in Morgantown to really make that come together. and the fit now that feels like right in that 50-ish range of where he will fall coming off that leg injury and where the Steelers are picking there at 51. It makes a lot of sense. I want to be clear on this as the guy who is wearing a Zack Frasier West Virginia jersey, lovely one that my wife got me from the NIL store for Christmas, by the way. Jackson Powers Johnson is my number one center on my big board, okay? So you can't hashtag not a homer, all right? But Zack Frasier is my number two. And I think at 51, he fits a lot of what the Steelers need. He has, and again, I will preface this, I will be honest with you, he has average size and average athleticism. But other than that, he checks, and I didn't say he's not Kendrick Green with his size, right? He's not Mason Cole with his athleticism. He's an average athlete. He's an average size. Every other box, is like a 4.0 GPA. I mean, this guy he knows how to move. He knows how to use his body. Everyone's heard the stories of the 4-time state wrestling champion. His upper body torque, his leverage is textbook. It's unbelievable. His footwork has gotten better every single year he's been at WVU. His first true freshman to start at WVU since the 1980s. 4 years, started every single game. He's cerebral, and he's the type of guy that you want as the anchor, as the center of your offensive line. Academic All-American all 4 years, had a scholarship offer from Stanford too, coming out of high school, right? So he was legit to get a scholarship offer to Stanford. He's a smart guy. He works in his wood shop on his little farm in West Virginia, and he punches people in the mouth. Like, I know to some people this stuff doesn't matter, but to a lot of people, there's been that hearkening of like, we have to get back to the Steeler way. We have to get back to that Steeler culture. We need team-first guys, quiet guys who are just obsessed with football. And that's what Zack Frasier is. Like, he is every single cliche in that book. He works his tail off. He lives, breathes, and eats football. And I think in a lot of ways he would be a perfect Steeler. He'd be great in Arthur Smith's system. Again, he is not he's not Jackson Powers Johnson. He's not Marquise Pouncey coming out of college. But he is a guy who can start and can have an impact right away on day one. And like I said, that sweet spot range, too, of where he's going to fall, fitting with where the Steelers are at, I think lines up pretty well.
Former wrestler. That's all I need to hear.
Beard.
Yeah.
We're big beard guys here on the show. Former wrestler Beard. He's tough as nails. He's the most. I agree with you that I would draft Jackson Powers Johnson first, but I think in terms of the his level of play compared to like he's as pro ready as he's going to be. Like, he could start in week 1, and I really don't think that it would be an issue. I think Jackson Powers Johnson has like more room to grow. He probably has more potential, but I would love to draft Zack Frasier and start him in the first round. I think he's sort of exactly the kind of personality that the offensive line kind of needs. They don't have anyone that I really think is really like him. I heard very rarely does Mike Tomlin say something and I'm just like, what? But he made a comment comparing Broderick Jones and his like personality and his leadership potential to Marquise Pouncey. And I'm just like, Marquise Pouncey's golden retriever. No, like, that's not that guy. He's like a big, jolly, happy kid.
Yes,
he's a kid. Yes. First of all, he is a kid. He's like, 21 years old. Like, he's a very young man. But he is just, I feel like offensive linemen are generally either big, happy-go-lucky guys, right? You got your Max Starkses, you got that's sort of personality, or you just have big old angry bears, right? That's and I think you need a good mix of the two of them. And I think that there's a lot more big old angry bear in Zack Frasier.
No doubt. And listen, you guys are welcome to steal this if you want to. This is the type of thing that will appeal to the, the crowd out there that wears the run the damn ball hats and everything. This will appeal to you. When Zack Frasier got onto campus 4 years ago, WVU's run game averaged 73 rush yards per game. Bottom of the barrel in Power 5. It was like, my God, can WVU rush for 100 yards today? It'd be the greatest thing ever. We could really win this game, but we got to rush for 100 yards today. Going for 73 per game when he got on campus. This past year, his last year, over 250 per game. The number one rushing offense in Power 5 football. and they gave up 4 sacks the entire season, second fewest in Power 5. They once went over 200 snaps, the WVU offensive line, without giving up a sack. They used 7 different offensive line combinations starting in 12 games. So it wasn't like all this continuity. It was Zack Frasier in the middle of the line, not single-handedly, all right? He's got a guy, Doug Nestor, who was at the Shrine Bowl, who's a right tackle. I don't know if Doug's going to get drafted, but he'll get a chance in camp with somebody. He's a good player. He's got a left tackle, Wyatt Milam, who we'll be talking about next year, who will be a day 2 pick in the draft from the offensive line from WVU as well, too. But Zack Frasier, make no mistake about it, guys, from 73 rush yards per game to 4 years later, the best rushing attack in Power 5 football, over 250 per game. And he was, it was a group effort, obviously, but he was the catalyst of that, the straw that stirred that drink.
One more thing about Frasier, too. A lot of people will say that the Big 12 doesn't play defense, and those people are mostly correct. But Byron Murphy, defensive tackle, going to be a day 2 pick. Jalen Hutchins from Texas Tech is going to get drafted and probably drafted highly. He smacked around Penn State until that game got out of hand. I was just going
to say, go watch the Penn State tape.
West Virginia couldn't run the ball anymore, but they were dominating Penn State up front. He played some of his best games against some of his best competition. So I think that really, to me, bodes well in his favor.
Yep. Byron Murphy goes first round, San Francisco, after they trade Eric Armstead.
Oh, whoa. That's spicy, but I mean,
right now.
He's right there
also,
in the first round.
When I watched, we got to talk about Wes, but when I watched Zack Frasier, what I came away with, not out in space because he's not as good of an athlete as this guy. I think he's got some Frank Ragnow to his game in terms of his pass protection.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what I like that a lot. I will say, with all respect to Quan Alexander, if the Steelers draft Zack Frasier, the sales of 54 jerseys is going through the roof.
I got one. I'll get one.
I will also have a great first name. You know, I might not like where he went to college. Great first name, though. All right. So we got to wrap up the show talking about Wes. We do this with everybody that we bring on here to ride shotgun with us.
Oh, boy.
Very fitting that you're riding shotgun with us for this episode, by the way. And I want to talk about your journey, what you're doing now, and all that good stuff. So let's go way back, just in terms of like how you even became a fan of the teams that you are a fan of and your journey through sports.
Yeah, so, I was born at Allegheny General Hospital on the North Shore of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in February of 1991. And then finally, the Pittsburgh Penguins started winning Stanley Cups because they were just waiting for me to get here, baby. I was born in Pittsburgh in 1991. With the I went to college at WVU, and then work took me to Ohio and Philadelphia for a few years out of college. But with the exception of that, I've been a Pittsburgh kid, born and raised my whole life. My family lived in the Wexford area until I was 13. I was in 7th grade, I think. And then they moved to Mars. My parents built a house in Mars, and that's where I graduated from high school and everything, the center of the universe, Mars, Pennsylvania. I grew up playing hockey. I played football as well, too, through 9th grade. But I was breaking fingers. I was getting hurt every year, and I actually was a pretty decent hockey player. So hockey was my first love, still is my favorite sport to play and everything like that. But football's kind of always been the spectator sport of choice, right? My initials are WVU. So yes, my parents did that on purpose. My mom and dad met at WVU. My dad thought it would be hilarious if my initials were WVU. My mom said, no way, you're crazy. Eventually, my dad drove her nuts enough that she said, you know what? If we have a boy, you can name him. If we have a girl, I'm naming her. And so when I was born a boy, my dad had won the bet and made my initials WVU. So I was a huge Steeler fan growing up, without a doubt. But football to me growing up was a Saturday thing. Like we'd pile into my grandparents' RV, and we had tailgate passes and season tickets, and we would go down on Friday nights and sleep in the RV and get up on Saturday and go to the games. Like I told you guys, I lived in Youngstown, Ohio, worked for the Youngstown Phantoms there, a hockey team for 2 years before I got a job with WIP for 3 years in Philadelphia, which is the Philadelphia Eagles and the Philadelphia Phillies flagship station out there. My wife's from Philadelphia. So when we first got married, I got a job out there and lived out there for 3 years. So aside from those 5 years that I was in Youngstown and was in Philly, I've been to over 100 WVU football home games in my lifetime easily. I've had season tickets since the day that I moved back from Philly. But yeah, man, grew up just, Steelers won 2 Super Bowls when I was in high school. Penguins went to 2 Stanley Cups, won one of them, and then won 2 more, in my mid-20s. Still waiting for the Pirates to do something besides Cueto to really give me some juice here. But yeah, been fortunate enough to be born and raised in a sports-crazed area. Got the idea when I was in high school at some point. I wanted to be like a cross between Stevie Ray Vaughan and John Mayer at some point when I was growing up. My dad is a violinist, so I wanted to do the music thing as well too. But just realized I wasn't very good and that wasn't going to happen for me. And so then when I started to think, hey, what do I want to do for a living? Got involved with a broadcast class my senior year in high school, did the morning announcements, called some football games, that type of thing, which really sparked my interest. Went to WVU for this, worked around the teams, worked at the newspaper, worked at the radio station, worked in TV, and just kind of slowly found my way through jobs and back to Pittsburgh. I'm really rambling on here. I don't know how much of this you guys wanted to know, but yeah, out of college, got the job with the hockey team in Ohio for 2 years, and then that was a blast, but I was done traveling 8 months a year. It was just too much. I got married. I wanted to have kids, all that stuff, and that's what led me to get into radio full-time. From Philadelphia and then back here to Pittsburgh. And so, like I told you guys earlier, this was my 6th season with the Steelers, which has been just, to get to work with Billy Hillgrove and Craig Wolfley and Max Starks and, our dear buddy Tunch Yokin and all these guys, Stan Savran and Phil Bork and Mike Lang and, all these people that I grew up listening to that I now work with, Mike Pursuta. Like it's been pretty darn cool. It's been a fun journey for me here. It's been about 10, 11 years since I graduated college. So I've been all over the place, but I am happy and hopeful that I'm going to be here in Pittsburgh for a long time because this is home and I sure don't want to go anywhere.
2 questions about your stops on your journey here. Best and worst road trips in the USHL.
Oh, goodness gracious. Is there even a best, honestly? They're probably just all the worst.
Like
the worst and the least worst.
Madison's a good town. I know Madison's on the tour there.
So it's funny. Best is the college towns. So Lincoln, Nebraska was always a really good time. Madison, Wisconsin, always a really good time. And then we do Ann Arbor sometimes as well too, which was it's like like Plymouth is where they play now, but sometimes we were in Ann Arbor. Green Bay, always fun too, just because like you're right in downtown Green Bay. We'd get to, we'd always get tours of Lambeau and all that stuff. But I would say the college towns, Madison, Wisconsin, definitely high on the list. Lincoln, Nebraska as well too. Worst USHL road trip, man, there's some rough ones. Youngstown probably wouldn't be too high on the list.
The rest of the league, it's Youngstown. But you were starting in Youngstown, so we'll eliminate that one.
Cedar Rapids, Fargo, just honestly nothing against Fargo.
So far.
It's so far and it's so cold, man. Like every time we went there, it was like 3 degrees outside every single time. And so, yeah, there were some rough road. Ooh. No, I'm going to stick with Fargo. I was going to say Sioux City, South Dakota, but they have a really cool bar scene. So that made Sioux City all right.
Well, that makes up for a lot.
It is funny how you judge road trip cities a lot of times is just like, okay, how easily can I walk from my hotel to dining and drinking establishments? Like that's kind of
like people ask me like, oh, what's it like to be in, I don't know, name a city like, like what was like what's Tampa like? I'm like, I don't know. I flew in, I took an Uber to my hotel, I took an Uber to the stadium, I took an Uber back to my hotel, and I went to the by the airport. I didn't see.
Like we go on these. Yes, we go on these trips, and like everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to Vegas? You got to do this, and this."
Like I'm there, buddy, for 12 hours.
I'm like, I'm grabbing dinner and a couple beers, and then I'm working a 14-hour day the next day. Like, what are we talking about here?
The longest I've ever spent in a city for a road trip was Buffalo this year.
I was going to say too, Alan, like that was the thing when I was in the USHL, like a lot of times we'd go to these places, like we'd leave on a Thursday and then we'd play Friday, Saturday games, sometimes Sunday games before we
3-3 and then taking a 2-day bus drive back.
Yeah. So sitting in Des Moines, Iowa for 4 days is not, I'd much rather be in Vegas or LA or Houston or somewhere like that for 4 days. Tampa.
We're like ridiculously
no,
over time.
No offense to the good people of Des Moines, Iowa, of course.
But I want to ask this. What was your experience in Philly like? You know, I only have this from one lens, right? I've born and raised in Pittsburgh, and I've only worked in this city. And when you get these jobs, like it becomes very easy, or at least it was for me, to kind of turn the fan in you off and act like a journalist and look at things objectively. But there is still, you still have that sort of knowledge of the team's history, and also like a sort of intuitive connection with, maybe I'm not going to emote the same way the fans are, but I at least have a pretty good idea of the way they're going to react to things because these are my people and I know them. What was it like going to Philly and covering teams that you didn't have any of that pre-knowledge or connection with?
So if I'm going to be blunt with you, I loved it. I mean, I loved my 3 years in Philadelphia. I remember it fondly, the relationships, the memories, because it's a completely, like it is, guys, it's so similar. Like it's like same church, but a completely different pew than Pittsburgh's. It is that same eat, sleep, breathe your sports team, right? And we live in the Northeast and the weather is crap 6 months a year and like our sports teams are all that we got, right? And they try and pretend that like the Jersey Shore is this big, huge, glamorous thing that they have. And the Jersey Shore is fine. I enjoy going there, all right? But it's Atlantic City and all those different places, all right? You're still about 50 minutes away from Philadelphia. It ain't these southern beaches, all right? It's not Siesta Key. It's not the Florida Gulf Coast. It ain't Hilton Head or Charleston, South Carolina, all right? But Philly is so similar to Pittsburgh, but they haven't had nearly the sports success that we've had. So it's made them more angry and more passionate in their own unique way. And it's just the population size is almost 6 times the size of Pittsburgh. So I loved it, guys. I did. It was very weird to me because the football was still there. The baseball was still there. They don't care about the Flyers. I mean, there's like a small percentage of people in the city that are hockey fans. It's almost like Flyers fans are like their own cult, really. And it was very bizarre to me how little people cared about the Flyers, but the Sixers were a massive deal. So it was the first time in my life that an NBA team really moved the needle because Philly is such a huge basketball city. And that kind of spilled into like the Big Five collegiate basketball teams too. Villanova, St. Joe's, Temple, you know, all those schools. And Nova won those 2 national championships while I was there. So it was a very cool kind of shift in that regard for me. And then just obviously I was there. I was working for the Eagles flagship station for the Eagles radio network when the franchise won their first Super Bowl, in franchise history. And so like Zach, you and I, and I mean, Alan, you too, right? Because I don't know if you were alive yet, but if you would have been in diapers. I don't think you were.
No,
you
I was not alive for the 70s Super Bowls. No.
Okay. Yeah,
but
exactly.
My first championship I saw was the Pens in 91.
Okay, so like the 3 of us will never know what it was like to be alive, to be working in Pittsburgh in media and sports when the Immaculate Reception happened, right? Like we just won't. That was before our time, but I was alive. I was working in Philadelphia in the greatest sports moment in the history of their city. So it was really cool for me. It's very different. Like you think of some of this like vitriol that has come out really towards Mike Tomlin over the last couple of years, towards Kenny Pickett over the last couple of months. Like that's the norm in Philadelphia. Like that's like standard daily operating procedures. Like it was wild. Our morning show, I mean, they would have Doug Peterson on every single Monday and they would crush him. Like they would not handle him with kid gloves. They would not ask him easy questions. Like they would crush Doug in the 3rd quarter on 2nd down. You did this. And what were you thinking? And why were you seeing it? So I loved it, guys. I really did. From a sports junkie perspective, it was awesome. And like you said, Alan, it was really cool for me too, because I wasn't emotionally invested in any of the team's results. I could honestly watch things. I could honestly evaluate things. When I thought teams were doing well and had a chance, we could talk about it. When I thought teams were struggling and were fumbling the bag, were messing things up, we could talk about it. I did. I really enjoyed my time in Philadelphia. I was ready to move back to Pittsburgh. Like I said, I'm happy that I was here. But man, just for being just 4.5 hours away, like I said, it is really weird because there's a lot of those similarities of how like we eat and breathe and sleep our sports teams, but it is on such a different level there. It's insane. They are crazy, man. There's no other way to put it. They're crazy.
As are we. Love to hear it. Wes, thanks for jumping in and riding shotgun with us on this episode. A lot of fun. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter at Wesley Uhler. I host the Steelers Blitz with Arthur Moats. You can find us at noon on Steelers Nation Radio and on 970 Fox Sports ESPN. You can also just get us wherever you subscribe to your podcast, right? And then I do 2 different WVU shows, Ears and Beers, as Alan was kind enough to mention earlier. And then I do a WVU football show called In the Gun Podcast as well, too, with Owen Schmidt, former WVU football legend. And we will have big Zack Frasier, future Pittsburgh Steeler, on the podcast this week. So if you're looking for more on, if you're jumping down the Zack Frasier rabbit hole, you can catch our conversation with Zach there tomorrow.
Yeah, dang it. I'm actually going to have to support your other show.
Owen Schmidt, giver of the greatest quote in recent college football history to my good friend Alex Kirshner in his long form story about the 13-9 game. And if you haven't read it, go read it, because I'm not very often like jealous of other people's work in this industry, but I read that quote and I'm like, that's good. I wish I'd written that.
We lost to the shittiest effing team of all effing time or something like that.
It's one of the best ever. Go find that and read it. You can find me at _Saunders PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. That's where I wrote about Chris Passo's draft rankings. Nick Faribault has a punter draft profile, since the Steelers don't have one of those on their active roster right now. Check it out, a guy from BYU who had a big leg at the Shrine game.
There we go. You can find me at Zachary Smith PGH. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Leave us a comment down below. Ask us a question. We will only answer questions if you preface it by saying 13-9 right before asking that question. Let's get out of here right now. Zachary Smith, Alan Saunders, Wes Yer. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.